Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Today is April 22nd, and this is another of our bi-weekly SIG CLI meetings. My name is Maciej, and I'll be your host today. Our agenda is packed today, so let's get the ball rolling. A quick announcement: 1.19 release dates has been announced. There are some discussions around changing those. They might shift by a day or two sooner than the ones that I put in the agenda. So I put the link to the release 1.19 repo. You can follow it on your own and see what the actual dates are. Also, the changes were announced in KubeDev. If I remember correctly, Stephen Augustus sent an email on Monday about the PR, which will be modifying those. So that's the most important announcement. And with that, we can move to the main topics. And first one will be Jordan with mechanism for warning about API changes. Take it away, Jordan.
Cool. I had a super short demo. If you want to unshare your screen, I can show that.
Sure. Okay.
Oh.
And
it says I'm not allowed to share my screen.
Yeah. Now you should be able to.
Cool. Oh, you know what? This is going to be exciting. I have to rejoin. How about if you go on to the next item, and I'll get my screen sharing set up.
Okay. Okay, so the next one is Alex, talking about composition, support, and customize.
Hi, everyone. Hope you hear me.
Loud and clear.
Great. As you can see on the agenda item, there's an issue regarding how we can have composition and customize. For those who are not familiar with what is this issue, basically the TLDR is this. Customize has supports self-contained application customization logic into overlays. And you can stack these overlays, you can chain them, you can compose them as you will. The thing is, though, that if these overlays have the same base, then they may, the customization may not apply. It may fail. So there's a discussion in this issue where we can hopefully somehow fix the situation. Philip probably knows more about it. Hopefully you've seen this issue, Philip. My question regarding this issue is this something that is acknowledged as a problem in Customize? I mean, how you can put logic into overlays and then compose them in some way. And if it is acknowledged as a problem, is this something that there's a PR that fixes, that proposes a solution for it? Is this PR towards the right direction? Does a Customize core team have a different way to solve this issue? And that question goes mostly to Philip Whitrock.
Hi, yes. Is Jeff on the call by any chance either? Because he is probably going to have some opinions about this.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing Jeff.
Okay, so I think Jeff is also a great person who has at least as much knowledge about Customize and a vision for its future as I do. And we often have different ideas that I think it's good to understand kind of like both different pieces of the same problem. So it'd be good to include him in the discussion as well, but while we're here, let's take a stab at it. I think this is probably a technical discussion that we could spend some time on. And so what I'm going to ask is that perhaps we could look through the agenda and make sure that we can cover any topics that are like routine status updates or this sort of thing, and then save this till all those are covered, and in that way we can let it take up the rest of the meeting. Mache, what do you think about that? Just because I know that like when we've done this in the past, usually we get into a good technical discussion and then have to kind of cut it off halfway through to address the other items.
Yeah, that's pretty understandable. And my intention was not to create that much of a technical discussion. I'm mostly
No. That's perfectly fine, and we like to have technical discussions. And I see there's another customized topic from Chen's towards the end. I'm pretty sure that Julian and Antoine, they want to announce the changes to the server-side apply upcoming in the 119. So I hope it'll be reasonably quick, unless Jordan is ready with his announcement about the warning APIs.
Yeah, I'm ready. Sorry about that.
Sure, no worries. Okay, let's try to share your screen.
All right, can you see it?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so just to walk really quickly through what I'm envisioning this experience would look like. We've had a problem for a long time where we have things that are long deprecated that people don't actually realize they're deprecated, or they're using and they don't realize it, and then it gets dropped, a year and a half later, and they're surprised. So this proposal is to try to help avoid that surprise. So I have here a file with a bunch of beta level RBAC things. And today, if you go apply that to a cluster, it happily accepts it, and you have no idea you're using something that's deprecated. And so what I'm proposing would be to have the server send back warning headers so that when you apply these things, you actually see that it's deprecated, when it was deprecated, when it's going to be unavailable, and what you should use instead. And your request still succeeds. It's just a header that comes back from the server. So like everything that previously succeeded server side will still succeed. And old clients that don't pay attention to these warning headers would continue working as is. There would be stuff in client Go to parse these headers out and have them available in the responses, and then a piece in kube control specifically that would handle those warnings by outputting them like this. And because it happens at the client level, it applies no matter what commands you run. So if you run a git command, or if you, let's see, annotate. You're doing annotate, like whatever you're doing, if you're talking to deprecated endpoints and you're getting back warning headers, you're going to get these things output. It even works for raw output. So that's exciting. If I talk to a deprecated API, again, because it's happening at the client level, if the headers come back, we can display them. So we can do some clever things like deduplicate warnings, for a given invocation of kube control. So if you create 50 of the same thing, you're not going to get the same message 50 times. That's just silly. Anyway, the KEP is linked from the agenda. The main impact to SIG CLI is the kube control piece, which is how we decide to handle these warnings inside kube control. And so my proposal is deduplicating, outputting to standard error, and coloring the warning if you're on a smart terminal. David had one request in the KEP to have an option to treat warnings as fatal, so that someone who was running in CI could opt in to like running in strict mode or whatever. So that's kind of the only outstanding thing for kube control that was part of the that was under discussion. So if you have feedback on this in general or about that specifically, or have other things, jump into the KEP and make comments. And I'd like to get this going at least in a beta stage for 119. That's it.
Hey Jordan, does the output like differentiate between like this is a warning and this is like, does it have levels of severity?
No, so in some cases, client Go and kubectl already log warnings to standard error. And this does not have levels. It's making use of a warning header, which is, there's actually an RFC around. And so I was trying to avoid sort of building an API within an API and keep this just very straightforward, not make clients who already handle warning headers need to do anything Kubernetes specific.
Yeah, I was wondering, really, the last thing you said about the exit code. Like, I could imagine, you know, having the exit code, like emitting just a standard out, but exiting 0, like until it's about to be deprecated or something like that. Or like, I can imagine different behaviors wanting to be controlled on the server side.
Yeah, I'm pretty hesitant to add that level of complication to this.
I mean,
that seems like the kind of thing we could bike shit on forever.
I mean, what David proposed, having a strict mode where you would just fail the command because you're using the deprecated APIs that you can opt in, is a reasonable option. You have either warnings or you're getting errors. Having something in between seems...
The warning mechanism is a general mechanism. The first use of it would be around deprecated APIs, but there are other things that we would want to warn about. Things like, you sent us duplicate fields in a YAML file. Like, we're ignoring everything but the last field. You probably didn't mean to do this. That's probably an error, but we can't fail for backwards.
We actually talked about something similar with regards to warning about you're running a more than supported skewed version of kubectl. Sean was proposing that last one. So if you're running kubectl 2 versions apart from the server, you would get a warning in a similar fashion. So yeah.
Yeah, so the proposing a mechanism and then an initial use for deprecated APIs, but the mechanism would be usable for lots of other things in the future.
Yeah, that was my quick question, Jordan, was could we use this to warn about version skew between the client and server? Does this seem like a useful mechanism for that? The warning.
If that could be detected reliably, yes.
My only question about that is the server side responsible for knowing anything about whether the client is compatible with it, or is that client side's job to determine that skew? That's my
yeah, I mean we've made support statements about like we test and support kubectl within a minor version of the server. I'd like to see that widen actually, but whatever our support statement is, like if you're using a version that's 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 versions old, like rather than making people have to notice squirrely behavior that crops up because of that and then file an issue and then us tell them, oh yeah, that's not supported. Closing that loop sooner and saying, like, we recognize your client, your user agent as kubectl version whatever, and the server's at version whatever plus 6. Like, you should know you're using a version that hasn't been tested at that skew.
Yeah, definitely. I guess what I was saying is if you have clients other than kube, does the server need to know anything about kubectl to know, like, to bake in something that says, I'm going to check specifically for this user agent to see if it's compatible, but there may be other clients or whatever that need to test their.
Yeah, it would be kubectl specific, and I'm not super happy about like hard coding special treatment of special clients in the server.
No, no,
Kube
no,
control
that would
already has
be,
an option that says like ensure I match the server version, but it's actually very, very strict. Like you have to
Very
exactly
strict.
match
yeah,
the exact build. It's basically unusable.
The exact commit.
yeah.
Yep.
No, 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 that was,
All right.
I was
I know you
alluding
got a
to
full
only
agenda.
the client side part. Okay, thanks, Jordan.
Yep.
Thanks, Jordan. This looks really good.
With that, we can then move to Julian and Antoine about the server-side plans.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Awesome. Okay, so I think we missed 1.19 planning last week or a couple weeks ago, but we just wanted to announce what we're planning to do for this release for server-side apply. We would really like to get the default for kubectl as close as possible to be server-side apply. So the two important pieces there are the upgrade and the downgrade. So we're looking for early feedback on the KEP and then some of the changes or what we're planning to do, and then eventually actual like some reviewer. Ideally, that's the same person. Yeah, and maybe some briefly what we want to do for the upgrade is make it so that there aren't conflicts initially when someone wants to manage an object with server-side apply instead of client-side apply. And then for the downgrade, we want to make it also seamless. If someone finds that server-side apply isn't working for them, they can use client-side apply and it would work as before. Yeah, so I think that's what we wanted to announce. And if there's feedback, ideally, if you could look at the KEP and maybe those PRs, that'd be great.
I think my only question was, I remember that in one of the documents describing the upgrade path from client-side apply to server-side apply, there was a table outlining all the possibilities, how the mechanism will react. Is that somewhere in the PR or in the enhancements as well?
Yeah, that isn't,
Okay.
but yeah. If you, yeah, actually, if you could read the KEP, maybe it's possible it's missing some details. That table was very clear, so ideally, yeah, the KEP. Yeah, we're just transitioning that doc into the KEP, so ideally, it's representative.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Julian and Antoine? Definitely, I'm going to point everyone to have a look both at the KEP and the PRs.
Yeah, that's something I want to add.
Huh?
I want to add something. So especially since we have this SIG release email yesterday that says that we shouldn't do something that's going to require an action. There is a little difference that's going to happen when we change client-side apply to server-side apply by default, is that now we can have conflicts if you're trying to change a field that somebody else owns, which didn't happen before. So I'm thinking about CI/CD systems that have or use kubectl today to apply files. People are going to have to change their CI/CD system to change the options, maybe to force conflicts or to decide what to do with the conflicts. So there is a change that I think we need to acknowledge, and we need to agree that this is going to be okay.
Honestly, I mean, either way, whether it'll be this release or the next one, it has to eventually happen. My only ask would be to have a clear instructions and information in the release notes to ensure that people are aware that this is happening. And if they stumble upon an error in the kubectl when they will be actually applying, it should be either, oh yeah, this is a problem, and either a link to a blog post, a bigger documentation, or if it fits several lines that you can put in the error, it's better to over document this problem if we actually will be seeing these problems rather than not. So that will be my only ask about that one. But I'll have a look in the cap and I'll leave the comment as well there.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, I'm hearing no other questions, so let's move over to Eddie, because I'm pretty sure that we want to leave the rest of the meeting for the customize. So Eddie, documentation on kubectl commands.
Yeah, so I've been working through trying to get some best practices together because all of our commands do things differently, every single one. The problem is that there's still no source of truth. So I've been throwing questions at you, Mache, and Phil, and Sean, and Brian, and everyone. So I think we need to figure out, I'm happy to take the charge on it, but I don't know what we want to decide on. So I'm happy to document it, maintain it, get it all up. But it's just like simple things like, you know, we have the complete, validate, and run methods as convention. Should those be exported, right? Like they're not really usable outside of calling, like you can never use validate without calling complete before it. Otherwise the struct won't be set up, right? So like none of it's really useful unless you're running through everything by itself. Should you always include them as stubs? Or should you leave them out if there's no need to like do a complete or something? And so those are like the big questions I've been running into, is just stuff like that. Like I said, I'm happy to take that on and own that, but I don't know what to fill it out with.
Oh yeah, I'll be definitely in favor of documenting these because we've been repeating those over and over through several SIG meetings on past KubeCons, and whenever I was doing code overview for kubectl, these were definitely one of the most important topics and questions that I was answering. As for the 3 methods, I'm leaning towards no, we don't have to have them if you're not doing anything. So it's fine to I don't see any reasons for every command to have empty methods just to follow the pattern. I think it's useless. The fact that you will be exporting them is for other people, for other consumers, to be able to reuse the command or build on top of the commands. I know that I'm doing this, and I know we are doing this within kubectl itself. For example, the wait command is being reused in delete and some other place. And I was recently pointing to someone how he can reuse the wait command. In OpenShift, I'm reusing part of the commands and building on top of them. So that kind of a pattern is very helpful because you can easily hook into either completing the structure or validation or the actual execution. As well, it simplifies a lot unit testing of the commands. If you look through some of the commands, even today, the unit tests that some of them have are super complicated. They are creating the entire factory and everything else to be able to verify very simple bits, the test factory, instead of just fill in the structure that you care and run either validation or the actual command with fake clients, which are much easier than setting up the entire test factory, which is usually enormous, and you end up implementing fake HTTP requests, which is at the same time, which is very, very cumbersome. That's why I would lean towards, yes, having 3. They're not required, although probably complete and run would be required, and validate will be optional. That's what I was usually telling in the past. I would keep the same statement here and make sure to follow what Sean started and we were talking last meeting and the meeting before about separation between the Cobra flags and the actual implementation. Those bits, I know we don't have them implemented across the entire code base, but it's definitely something that we would want to see in the long run.
Okay, so why don't we do this? So I pasted a link to the PR I have open. If everyone can just pile on with all the nitpicks and everything, and we can like figure out, like, let's make this PR the perfect example of what a command should look like. And then from that, I can get a doc together that we can circulate and fill in the unanswered questions. But let's use this PR as a source of truth, because then I can pull out all the best practices that we implement from there.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. I think I did that last time, but I'll do more nitpicking then in the next day. Does anyone have any questions, suggestions for Eddie?
Thanks for doing that, Eddie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
that is awesome idea.
The nice thing is that once we get these umbrella issues, so I've been waiting to open the umbrella issue to refactor all the commands like we put on the 1.19 roadmap. So once we get like the best practices done, then we can open that umbrella issue, mark it as good first time contributor with the docs and the guides, and hopefully get a bunch of new people contributing on that work.
Yeah, I definitely plan on paying attention to that and trying to jump in there. Thank you.
Awesome. Which reminds me that I'm going to change the approvers and the reviewers for SIG CLI, and I would like to call out to let me find the PR that I was looking at because I had it open. So I'll leave out the ones that I'm dropping because those people are not present anymore. But I would like to shout out to Brian and Yao because they are nominated for reviewers, and I'll put the PR together later today, so they will be our official SIG CLI reviewers. I'll link the PR in the agenda later today as well. So big congrats and thanks for your work. And with that, I think we can move over to the customized topics from Alex and Chance. I don't know who wants to start.
Let's start with Alex's, and then hopefully we can get time for Chances. I can stay late if needed, and we can have that discussion. Okay, so for the customized issue, Alex, thanks so much for filing this and like your clear persistence over the last year. I think I've tried to grok what's in the issue. It's about a year old and with a consistent stream of comments. So trying to reconstruct the thought, like all the ideas in here, was actually a bit challenging for me. And so I want to make sure that I kind of understand like kind of the core pieces. And maybe I'll just should I restate as I've read it, or Alex, would you like to kind of summarize the key points that you think are the most important?
I think you can restate so I can understand what is, so you can ask stuff and do it.
Sure. So I'll just throw a couple things out as I talk about it too, about different ways we're thinking about this. So I think the problem, right, is using customized for composition and basically using bases as reusable modules, right, for more like a abstraction almost pattern. So thinking about customized, like two core use cases. One is that you want to have some base, which is like my Spring Java backend service or something like that, right? Which defines most of what a Spring Java backend service is, and then maybe you switch out the config map. It references the image name and the like resources or something I could imagine. And now you can stamp out like 5 different backend services. each consuming from the same base, and that's kind of a composition. You have a composite customized referring to each one of those bases and needing to patch the same base differently multiple times or apply different images to it or that sort of thing. The second pattern customized is used for a lot is this sort of variant approach where instead of composing the same thing many times and kind of expanding it into multiple instances that are different, logically different and running next to each other, you have maybe a single instance of an app and then you want to customize it for different environments. And so these would be like variants. You have prod, you have staging, and then those would be different customized targets. And so the case this issue is addressing is the first one. And the challenge is that in this model, the same base, when the same base is imported multiple times, the resources that are imported multiple times share essentially the same primary key for their identity. And so that when you want to customize them, or when you want to create those different instances, like for your different backend services, all building on top of the original base for the archetypal backend service, that because they share the same ID, that you can't patch them differently, or you can't apply different patches and customizations to them, and that one workaround for this, right, is or the way that the customize was envisioned to address this issue was to kind of add a layer of inheritance, if you will, where you apply a name prefix to each instance that inherits from that base. Is a different name prefix that changes their IDs, and then they can be used separately and identified separately. I didn't quite get from the issue if that solution I just described is inherently broken in that the IDs are not actually changed, or if it does function but doesn't work well and doesn't provide, makes things like sharing patches difficult and these sorts of things. Would you mind clarifying that for me?
Sure. Yeah, I think you have approached the problem very well. It's the first case that you said before, but I think it's a little different, the actual issue. The problem is not that there are two overlays, let's say, that want to patch the same service and thus the same key. The problem is that when we have two overlays and we compose them, the same base is multiplied by as many times you have overlays. It's replicated, to say it better. So there's not just one key that the overlays will point to. There are two keys now, and Customize can't handle this. As you said, the approach was to, when Customize finds two overlays that point to the same base, the approach was to replicate it and thus create a second instance of that application. But my question is, in which cases does this make sense? If you want to have two separate instances of the application, which means, for instance, two different deployments with two different name prefixes, you'd probably create different overlays and do different kubectl apply -k. So I think this is where the flow comes, that Customize shouldn't replicate this. It should let the overlays point to the same key. And the PR that exists right now, it does exactly that. It doesn't replicate stuff. The overlays point to the same key, and it all works as expected. Does it make more sense?
I think I got about half of that. Part of it is it's hard without it's a very technical topic, and probably would benefit from whiteboards and such, but we're limited with that right now. But I think what you're saying is, like, you should be able to specify separate overlays for the same key, and then that would create two different instances. Is that what I heard?
That's what Customize does right now. The ideal is to separate two overlays. Let's say an overlay for authentication stuff and an overlay for storage stuff that affect, that edit, that alter the same key underneath the same base. And it should be just one instance with those two stuff incorporated in it. I don't know if it makes more sense.
And so Customize supports like the applying patches based on like label selectors and that sort of thing now. Does that address the issue at all? Or is that orthogonal?
No, I think that's orthogonal, yeah. If it's something that's much more technical and requires whiteboards, we can go through it on the customization, on the GitHub issue. I can probably explain a bit more. I can reiterate what's the case there. There's no need to take time from the other stuff. So yeah, I suppose we can resume there. Would that be okay?
You mean resume the rest of the meeting? Or
no, the conversation regarding composition, that we can resume it on this issue.
Yeah. Let's continue the discussion. So maybe I'll step back and try and give a high level, address from a high level some of your concerns, and then we can dig back deep into maybe technically how we can solve this problem. From a high level. Oh, go on.
Sure. I just want to say that also if Jeff could participate more in this, that would be even better. Or GFAN.
Yeah, I'll ping him. Jeff has been heads down on trying to solve another class of problems, which includes updating the version in kube control and getting off of the API machinery dependencies, which is also actually a pretty highly upvoted thing. So he's currently rewriting a lot of the internals, and that is going to actually hopefully address a number of other issues around. There's a different classes of issues that this may address by allowing us to provide better control over how Customize applies certain transformations. So I know he's head down on that, and he's been really cranking that out. I'm guessing it's going to be another month or so. It's kind of my swag on that one. But I will reach out to him about this. I think this is something we'd like to address, or this is a problem that users should be able to solve without forking Customize. That's true. We explored within the reuse case. There are a couple even sub variants of that case within the sort of abstraction case which you're describing. I think there's a couple variants. One is an individual owns pretty much all of the variants and bases, right? And so they're trying to construct a sophisticated system using Customize, which kind of does this, they build this graph, right? And that would work best for folks where maybe one or two individuals or maybe even a team of individuals is centrally managing a system that has those needs I described. A different variant of that is a more decentralized model where you want to use the Spring Spring backend service a base in your configuration, and then may stamp out maybe 3 or 4 instances of that. But that Spring base is published by Pivotal or VMware or something like that, right? And then you're not just pulling in the Spring base, but maybe a MySQL base, and so you're pulling in a bunch of different bases that you don't control, right? And in this case, one thing we've been exploring is through, so packaging. This is where it gets into kind of the packaging world, because that starts to look much closer to what a typical packaging solution would look like, in which previous discussions have led to not being a problem the Kubernetes community or the Kubernetes project is currently looking to solve. And so for that pattern, we've kind of pushed and built another tool for doing package management of that nature. And so that might be something worth considering for that case. If thinking about, is it a better model for you to do sort of a model where you pull down the configuration and have it locally and then maybe customize 3 different instances, but those 3 different instances you have kind of pulled down from the source, versus they're pulled down from the same source and then can kind of be updated from that same source, but they're stamped out fully and fully expanded, and then use those as inputs to customize? Or do you do the case you're describing? I think both are valid use cases. I think both make sense. It just depends on like what environment you're in. It seems like, my guess is yours is in the one where you really are trying to build a single graph that's centrally managed. Does that sound right?
Yes, that's correct. And I suppose that the tool you're referring to is Kept, right?
Yeah, the tool I'm referring to is Kept, yes. So Kept is a tool where we said, okay, or some of us said, okay, that's out of scope for the project, but we need kind of a way of doing it. And so we built that tool. There's probably other ones for doing package management as well that I'm not as aware of, but maybe use a similar approach. I think there's one called KubePack back in the day. I'm not sure what the status of that project is, but using, essentially saying, this is a package is this a package management problem I'm trying to solve, or is this a sort of more like a customization problem I'm trying to solve? And I think you could probably solve it with either tool.
Okay.
Or other type of tool.
Yeah, I haven't looked into Kept that much. If it can do variants, if we can frame our problem this way, then that will help the other customized users as well. Okay, so I'll take a look at that and
I can't say that's definitely going to solve your problem. I can only say that it might be an alternative approach, right? And was kind of written with this problem in mind from a different angle, I guess. That said, you may look at it and say, like, actually I prefer the more centralized approach to this, in which case I think we should still explore this problem. I think it makes more sense to dive. I know it's been a year, so I really appreciate your patience on that. And I think it will be easier. I think you did note that Jeff dropped off on attention on this issue, and that I think it's because he's been focusing on that other key problem. And while it may seem like just kind of an infrastructure change that maybe isn't addressing our users' pain points, right? Because to what extent do you see the value of us, rewriting that piece if you're maybe using customized directly, not who control? It will actually impact how things are written going forward, and will offer more capabilities for how we implement transformers and how transformers are configured. And so by doing that work early, ahead of this, it means that this work can be built on top of that architecture instead of trying to figure out like how do we rebase it, or what does it mean? What does that change in architecture mean for anything we did here? I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to look at your PR. Do you happen to have like one way that might be useful for framing this? And sorry, Chance, I know that we're running out of time. I'll stick around. I can stick around at least.
It's fine. This one's important to me, actually. So,
but I think one thing that would help, and there's no urgency to doing this, would be that if we could maybe write this from the user documentation perspective. Like I've been trying to envision it, like what would the doc that says the motivation for this tool is this feature, like if the PR were to be moved for this feature, what would the docs look like, and using that as kind of the design basis outside of this issue. This issue captures a great amount of history, certainly, and captures a great amount of the problem from a technical perspective. I think if you're trying to learn about the problem itself, there's a lot of great information here, but focusing on just like what does the solution look like and how simple is it and how easy is it to understand independent of this would be maybe a nice addition to help us.
I think some of that exists in the original issue, if not the MR, because I remember seeing something like, it might have been more recent, but I think somebody had an example of like, I want to apply a common node port transformer patch to multiple or different overlays or bases, I think. I'm trying to find it.
No, I do agree. It is in the issue. It's in the issue. I think it might be in the issue multiple times with multiple proposals, or maybe they're the same proposal, variants of it, right? And so I think it's not about like, oh, this information doesn't exist, but you know, to help people with less context on the issue, maybe just pulling out like which of these things in the issue is the one that we decided is the right one, and then putting that in like in
sorry, go
unless that's, is that in the PR?
It's in the issue, and I think I found it. It's like 29 days ago. It's from Steiny Bot. I can link it in the Zoom chat. It's not exactly like what I was thinking, but the idea, I think, is kind of there, that there's like a common overlay folder with like your set of maybe composition patches. And at least in this case, they are just like applying like a node port patch to their overlay. It's not quite what I was thinking, but it's somewhat close.
I have a similar case, which is like resource limits.
Yeah.
I think that's a little bit more like production that you can grok. Like some of these things actually have bursts that you want to be able to support. And the way that you bin pack is probably different based on your budget.
Yeah, I could come up with some examples too, probably, and provide them somewhere. I just need to know what's best, because it seems like there was already a lot of content and I didn't want to like muddle the waters. Like a simple example is just like, I want to disable this feature, and I don't want to have to like look at the commit history to figure out what the YAML needs to look like for that to be changed. If I just had a common patch that I could include when I want to toggle something on and off through, say, an environment variable or whatever, you know, that would be a case for reusable composition or reusable patches.
We have also some examples in a different repository, which are linked in the PR. But I get what you're saying. The main thing here is that the issue is very big, and it's very difficult for new users to navigate into it and the whole history. So I suppose I can distill the main points of that issue, probably to, let's say, new PR that adds some high-level user documentation, which probably is not correct, but will showcase what you can do with this PR, with composition. So.
Yeah, like if we could just agree upon the API from the person who's going to consume this perspective first, and then have that in like just like a markdown file, right? But like from the perspective of like you could almost do there's a task sort of documentation, I think, is one of the patterns, right? So maybe starting out with a task doc can say, okay, you're trying to patch this resource with that resource, and then just goes through and has the same format that if we were trying to sell this feature to an end user about how they would do it, which I think there's a lot of stuff that's really close in here, but having that as a separate markdown PR would be, I think, helpful to steer the discussion around that.
Sure. Okay.
And then this has been around, given that this has been around a year, iterating on kind of that API piece, and then fully focusing on it once the rebase that's in progress is done, I think would be, like, does that seem like a good approach to you? Like, is it?
Yeah, sure. If it clears stuff, then it's okay. It's fine by me.
Okay.
I was going to ask.
Go on.
I was going to ask. One of the things I was thinking that I found like kind of nice, and it's related to the issue I wanted to bring up next, is just like having a feature flag for that behavior as like another thing would be really solid, I think, because it would mean you could get it in and not commit to stability, but have people try it with the docs that are being authored, especially. And like, if it sucks and it's like not actually doing what we want, then it's like, okay, let's not roll this out to stable. Just seems like a really good approach for this type of complex, like not gonna fit everybody's bill kind of situation, probably.
That is a brilliant suggestion. I was actually just realizing the same thing, that we could, if we can introduce it in the code base, put it behind a feature flag, unblock you, figure out if it's the right solution, then it addresses the main concern, which is what happens when we want to change the API or something like that. Perfect. Okay. So why don't, would Alex, would you be willing to like follow up with this through this meeting? I think this meeting is really the best way to get attention around these sorts of issues and get forward progress on them, just because the sheer volume of issues that we encounter is actually quite large, and it's easy to have them kind of fall off your attention.
Sorry, the question is if I can follow up on this, right?
Does coming to this meeting work for you? Is this like 1 in the morning for you, or is it something that you could, continue
no, it's 7 p.m. where I am. It's fine. Yeah, it's the meeting is okay for me.
Okay, let's plan on driving this through the meeting then, and maybe once we have that PR out with the docs, some of us we can get that reviewed by some folks, and then we can formally discuss it, or we can come back to the meeting and discuss it at the meeting so that we don't thrash on issue comments.
Sure. That sounds good.
Great.
Okay, you want to talk through Jen's topic, or want to do stand-ups first?
Jen, how important, Chance, how long do you think the
I just need direction, really. I don't think it's all that controversial given it's already in the code base in some level. One, I don't know when or how setters got added, but I presume it's with the transition to the KYAML base libraries. But the idea is instead of using transformers to adjust values, you annotate fields. There's some echo. You annotate fields with comments in Customize, either in the resource or in your customization YAML, and Customize can then use like Customize config set, and then the setter name, and then the value that you want to set it to. So you get templating, no templating, but you still have the ability to adjust arbitrary values at very particular locations in the resources or customization. And so I've been using this in a lot of the ways that was being discussed previously. Is like there is no good way to have like a JBoss base or like a Python base that is just super reusable. So we've been creating a scaffolding base that we copy and then use setters to change the things that matter, like the default namespace or the name of the resource, the app label. And then we use the same approach for an overlay. And then we basically have a pair of scaffolding for a base and an overlay pair for everything we're doing. So far, this is going well. There's still caveats with setters not working perfectly, but I think it's a good start. And I was wanting to know how we get it from like an alpha to a more stable state or beta, because right now it's behind a feature environment variable before you can use customize config set. So
yes, I also add that it isn't updated regularly. That we kind of that probably the best way to get the recent version is to just build the setters binary. The setters also exist in their own binary,
okay,
which can be built as well, and that one will be up to date as of whatever release. I think so. One thing you're asking for is that I'm hearing you like this feature. You'd like us to continue to invest in it and bring it to be like a formally part of the customized solution, as opposed to some experiment that we're evaluating.
I think so, yeah. I don't necessarily know yet if it's fully fleshed out enough to go full feature, but it's more the path to that stability pattern for the pattern.
Right, or yeah, I guess I meant not that we need to do it today, but you'd like the capability to continue to be there.
Yeah, I think so.
One thing I'd like to mention is for a lot of the problems that Alex was bringing up, I started making a little POC that used kept and the setters of customize to kind of work around, I think, a very similar issue so that I can apply a shared set of patches. So I also like the setter feature. It's what I'm using to replace in places where I was previously using variables. So it's pretty nice.
Is it something that it's shareable, probably on a GitHub repo, so you can take a look?
My stuff's in a bunch of junk, but I could redo it in a way that is shareable. Yes, if you set up a meeting talking through your stuff, I can kind of. It could be a deadline for me to try to get that out there in GitHub as a sample.
The kept docs are pretty good about this too. Just FYI.
Can you say that again?
The kept docs are pretty good about covering this. Like I pretty much used it as my reference, but without kept. So kept has a few add-ons to the feature that customize doesn't, but you can mostly make it work if you read the combination of the -- help for customize config set, and also if you read the KPT docs on KPT CFG set. They're built on the same libraries. The pattern's very similar.
And Chance, when you were saying you were using scaffolding to call those setters, was it kept that you were using?
No, I was just like using customize and like handwriting my base and overlays, and then copy -r and then using customize config set, all from a README. So it's basically tutorial driven onboarding of new apps for our internal teams is how we're using this. And it's okay. It's not amazing, but it's not like terrible either. There's gaps with setters, like you can't use it on non-YAML basically in some ways, and that can be a problem. But yeah. So yeah, going to stability is kind of what I want to figure out. It's just like maybe we need more docs and examples of using this, somewhat like how kept docs are done upstream, with examples of like take a base, make some changes, and then like provide the like almost like what's being said previously for compositions PR. Like maybe we need some MRs to customize using config set as an alpha feature, demonstrating how somebody would use it in like a real use case similar to what's being discussed amongst us as a group right now. Once there's some docs, maybe like we can start to see if people use it, and if there's gaps, like I know there's some gaps for me, fix those gaps, and then maybe it gets to beta. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, did you mention writing a KEP as in KEP? like the Kubernetes enhancement proposal.
Earlier, I was referring to KPT.
Yeah. I was gonna say probably like the process for doing this in the project is to write a Kubernetes enhancement proposal.
Okay.
There's like a boilerplate thing you copy, and there's a number of fields that probably don't apply, but there is like sections explicitly called out. And then we can document it and have a formal place that the discussion takes place. And then I found that that's the formal process, and then it can be helpful to use social media to promote that the proposal exists, just because then everyone is at least aware of it, whereas sometimes if you just write the Kubernetes enhancement proposal, it doesn't get all the eyes it needs.
Okay. Yeah, so that just goes in the enhancements repo, like everything else. The cap.
Try it there. There should be like a CLI directory there, and that's where I put it.
Yeah.
Yep, there is one.
Besides that, I didn't really have anything else to talk about with regards to setters. I do think the composition part is quite related, and it's probably worth trying to make sure that setters are considered when we go through the composition work, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. That makes sense to me.
Okay. With that, I think we can almost close the meetings. I'll let Nick have his final call about COI updates, because I'm not seeing folks from crew, and I think Customize was given enough time.
I can let everybody go. Mostly a pointer to our documentation. The wiki link is there in the Zoom. Check it out. Mostly done. There's a few gaps, but it's pretty much done. It's all in pretty good shape. We're also starting some initial work to get OpenShift support geared up. And so that'll all be coming soon. We have some initial support in there already.
Okay, cool. So as a closing note, Eddie reminded me that there's a bug scrub next Wednesday. So I hope to see you there as well. And thank you very much. Sorry for the extended time that I took from you. And thank you very much. See you in a week. Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.